My brother-in-law is trying to destroy my marriage by spreading lies about me, and now my husband is threatening to leave me and move in with him unless I prove my innocence. When I first saw the text from Ryan, 34M, my husband's brother, I thought it was a joke. The message read, "I know all about what you've been up to, Hannah, 32F. It's only a matter of time before Kyle, 36M, finds out everything." My heart sank as I stared at my phone, trying to make sense of the words. Ryan and I had never been close, but he'd always seemed to get along with Kyle and me. We were family. Why would he send something like that? I tried to brush it off as a misunderstanding or some sort of cruel joke. But over the next few days, I started noticing strange changes in Kyle. He became distant, his usual warmth replaced with cold suspicion. Our once happy home was filled with tense silences and sideways glances. One evening, after another painfully quiet dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. "Kyle," I said, setting down my fork, "something's wrong. You've barely looked at me all week. What's going on?" He looked up from his plate, his eyes dark and troubled. "Ryan told me everything, Hannah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know who you are anymore." My heart pounded. "What are you talking about? What did he say?" Kyle stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen with his hands clenched into fists. "He told me you've been sneaking around behind my back, that you've been cheating on me. He even showed me messages, photos. How could you do this to us, to me?" I felt like I'd been slapped. "Kyle, that's not true," I protested, tears welling in my eyes. "I would never do that to you. I don't know what Ryan showed you, but it's all lies." He shook his head, looking at me like I was a stranger. "Ryan said you'd deny it. He warned me you try to twist it around, make yourself look innocent." The room seemed to spin as I tried to wrap my head around what was happening. Ryan was fabricating lies about me, and Kyle was actually believing him. It didn't make sense. Ryan had never shown any animosity toward me before, but now he was trying to destroy my marriage for reasons I couldn't understand. "Kyle, please," I begged, reaching for his hand. "I love you. I've never been unfaithful. Why would I throw away everything we built together?" But he pulled away, his expression hardening. "If you're really innocent, then prove it," he said coldly. "Ryan offered to let me move in with him if things fall apart between us. I don't want it to come to that, but unless you can prove he's lying, I don't see another way." I stared at him in disbelief. He was giving me an ultimatum: prove my innocence or watch him walk out the door and move in with the very person who was tearing us apart. How could I prove something that had never happened? How could I defend myself against lies? That night, I barely slept. My mind raced, trying to figure out what had triggered Ryan's sudden betrayal. I had to get to the bottom of this to find out what his motive was. But first, I had to figure out how to keep Kyle from leaving me. The next day, I went to Ryan's house. I left Ryan's house feeling more hopeless than ever. How could I fight against someone so determined to destroy me? How could I convince Kyle to trust me when his own brother was actively working to tear us apart? But I couldn't give up. If I let Ryan win, I'd lose everything I loved. I needed to find a way to expose him, to reveal the lies for what they were. I just didn't know how yet. That night, Kyle and I barely spoke. He was distant, his mind clearly racing with doubts and suspicions. I knew I couldn't just wait for the truth to come out on its own. I had to take action. I needed to figure out how Ryan had fabricated the evidence he'd shown to Kyle, and I needed to do it quickly. As I lay awake in bed, I came up with a plan. If Ryan had doctored messages and photos, there had to be digital footprints. I decided to reach out to Maya, my tech-savvy best friend, for help. She had experience with computers and might be able to help me find out where those fake messages had come from. The next morning, I called her and explained everything. Maya was shocked and furious on my behalf. "Hannah, this is insane," she said. "But don't worry, I'm going to help you prove that Ryan is full of it. We'll get to the bottom of this." As Maya started digging, I felt a glimmer of hope. If we could prove that Ryan had doctored the evidence, then I could show Kyle the truth. But time was running out. Ryan was already planting seeds of doubt, and every day that passed, I could feel Kyle slipping further away from me. When Maya called me back that evening, her voice was excited. "Hannah, I think I found something," she said. Ryan's not as clever as he thinks. I found some inconsistencies in the metadata of the photos he sent to Kyle. They were edited recently, not from months ago like he claimed. My heart raced. This was it, the proof I needed. But I knew that showing Kyle wouldn't be enough on its own. I had to find a way to confront Ryan in front of him, to expose his lies once and for all. With Maya's help, I set up a plan to trap Ryan into revealing the truth. It was a risky move, but I was willing to do whatever it took to save my marriage. The following morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of determination. If I was going to save my marriage, I had to take control of the situation. Ryan was a master manipulator, and Kyle was falling right into his trap. But now, thanks to Maya, I had a thread to pull, evidence that Ryan had fabricated the photos and messages he claimed were proof of my infidelity. The challenge would be getting Kyle to see it. When Kyle came home from work that evening, I could tell he was exhausted, his eyes shadowed with worry. He barely acknowledged me as he went straight to the kitchen to pour himself a drink. My heart sank. This was the man I'd built a life with, the man I loved, and here he was being torn apart by his brother's lies. "Kyle," I said, my voice soft but steady, "we need to talk. Please." He turned around slowly, his jaw clenched. "I don't know what else there is to say, Hannah," he replied, his voice cold and distant. "Ryan's shown me the proof. I want to believe you, but it's hard to ignore what I've seen." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I understand how it looks, but Ryan is lying to you. I know it's hard to believe, but I have proof that the messages and photos he showed you are fake. I can prove it if you'll just give me a chance." Kyle's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face. "What proof? Ryan wouldn't lie to me about something like this. Why would he go to all that trouble?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I said, stepping closer. "But I've had someone look into it. Maya found evidence that the messages were doctored. Timestamps that don't match up, edits that Ryan made recently. He's trying to sabotage our marriage, Kyle. You have to trust me on this." Kyle stared at me for a long moment, his expression conflicted. "You really expect me to believe that my own brother would go to these lengths to tear us apart?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Why would he do that?" I hesitated, knowing this was the hardest part to explain. "I don't know exactly why, but I think it has something to do with you. He feels like he's lost you ever since we got married. He's jealous of the life we built together, and he's trying to break us apart so he can have you to himself." Kyle's face twisted with disbelief. "That's ridiculous, Hannah. Ryan's been there for me my entire life. He's family. Why would he suddenly turn on me now?" "Because he feels threatened," I insisted. "He sees our relationship as something that took you away from him. But I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Let me show you the proof Maya found. Just give me that chance, and if you still think I'm lying, then I'll let you go." He was silent for a moment, and I could see the war raging in his eyes. Finally, he sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "Show me what you have." I felt a surge of relief. It wasn't a victory, but it was a small step forward. "Okay," I said quickly. "I'll set up a meeting with Maya. She can walk you through everything." The next evening, Maya came over, laptop in hand, ready to present the evidence she'd uncovered. Kyle was skeptical, sitting with his arms crossed as Maya explained how she had analyzed the metadata of the images and messages Ryan had shown him. She pointed out the discrepancies, the timestamps that showed the images had been edited just days before, despite Ryan claiming they were months old. "You see here," Maya said, pointing to her screen. "This message Ryan claimed was sent months ago was actually created just last week. And the photos he showed you, they've been doctored. The original versions don't exist anywhere else online, which means they were likely staged or manipulated." Kyle leaned in, squinting at the screen, but I could see the cracks starting to form in his resolve. I don't understand," he muttered, shaking his head. "Why would Ryan go through all this trouble just to lie to me?" "Because he's jealous, Kyle," I said softly. "He wants you to himself, and he thinks the only way to do that is to turn you against me." But Kyle still looked conflicted. "I don't know, Hannah. Ryan's been my brother my whole life. Why would he do this to me now?" Maya stepped in, her voice firm. "I get that it's hard to accept, Kyle, but sometimes the people closest to us can surprise us. You've seen the evidence. It's right here. I don't have a reason to lie to you, and neither does Hannah. Kyle ran his hands through his hair, looking lost. I need to talk to Ryan, he finally said, standing up abruptly. I need to hear his side of this. My heart sank. I knew Ryan was a master manipulator, and if Kyle went to him now, Ryan would double down on his lies. But I couldn't force Kyle to see the truth. He had to come to it on his own. Fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But please don't let him twist this around. You saw the evidence. Just think about it. Kyle nodded curtly and left without another word. As the door closed behind him, I felt a sinking dread in my stomach. If Ryan managed to convince Kyle that I was still a liar, then everything I'd fought for would be lost. Hours passed with no word from Kyle. I tried distracting myself by cleaning, scrolling through my phone, anything to keep my mind off the confrontation that was unfolding between the two brothers. Finally, around midnight, I heard the front door creak open. Kyle walked in, looking exhausted and defeated. I confronted him, he said, his voice hoarse. I showed him everything you and Maya found. I held my breath, waiting for him to continue. At first, he denied it, Kyle said, slumping into a chair. He swore it was all real, that he was just trying to protect me. But when I pushed him, when I told him I'd seen the metadata and all the inconsistencies, he finally cracked. What do you mean? I asked, my heart pounding. Kyle looked up, tears in his eyes. He admitted it, Hannah. He said he did it because he thought I was wasting my life with you, that you were pulling me away from the family. He said he just wanted me back. The relief that washed over me was so intense it nearly knocked me off my feet. So you believe me now? I asked, my voice trembling. Kyle nodded slowly. I'm so sorry, Hannah. I let him get into my head. I let him make me doubt you. I don't know how I'm ever going to make this right. Tears streamed down my face, a mixture of relief and heartbreak. We can figure that out together, I said, but you have to promise me one thing, Kyle. No more ultimatums, no more choosing between me and Ryan. If we're going to make this work, we have to be a team. He pulled me into a tight embrace, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of hope. But deep down, I knew that this wasn't the end. Ryan had admitted the truth, but he was still out there, nursing his bitterness and jealousy. And if I knew anything about him, it was that he wouldn't give up so easily. As I held Kyle close, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan's betrayal was just the beginning. In the days that followed Kyle's confrontation with Ryan, things between us slowly began to thaw, but it was like trying to rebuild a house that had been burned to the ground. The betrayal had left deep cracks, and while Kyle had finally seen the truth, there was still a lingering sense of doubt and distrust hanging in the air. I could see it in the way his eyes flickered when my phone buzzed, or how he hesitated before leaving for work in the mornings. I wanted to believe we could move past this, that once Ryan's lies had been exposed, we would find our way back to the way things were. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. The damage Ryan had done was deeper than either of us had realized. It wasn't just about the lies he'd told. It was about the way he made Kyle question everything we had built together. One evening, as I was making dinner, Kyle came into the kitchen, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. He leaned against the counter, rubbing his temples. Hey, I said softly, setting down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables. Are you okay? He let out a deep sigh, shaking his head. I don't know, Hannah. I thought confronting Ryan would make me feel better, that it would give me some closure. But all it's done is make me question everything. I don't understand why he would go to such lengths to hurt us. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over to him, placing a hand on his arm. I wish I had an answer for you, Kyle. I don't understand it either. But we can't let him keep controlling our lives, even now that we know the truth. Kyle nodded, but his eyes were distant, as if he were still trying to process everything. I just can't shake this feeling that there's more to it, that Ryan isn't done. He was too calm when I confronted him. It's like he's planning something else. A chill ran down my spine at his words. The thought that Ryan could still be plotting against us, even after being exposed, was almost too much to bear. But Kyle was right. Ryan hadn't been as rattled as I'd expected when the truth came out. There was a smugness to him, like he was holding onto some secret he wasn't ready to reveal just yet. That night, I called Maya again. She had been my lifeline through all of this, and I needed her perspective. As we spoke, I could hear her typing furiously on her keyboard. Maya, I'm scared, I admitted. Kyle thinks Ryan isn't done with us, and I can't shake the feeling that he's right. Honestly, Hannah, I wouldn't put it past him, she said. Guys like Ryan don't just back down when they're exposed. If anything, they double down. I've been doing some digging on my own just in case, and I think I found something interesting. What is it? I asked, my heart racing. Well, I went through Ryan's social media profiles and noticed something odd, she explained. He's been posting photos with captions about family and loyalty. Really passive-aggressive stuff. But that's not all. He's been meeting up with some shady people, people who have a history of manipulating situations and ruining reputations. I think he's gearing up to spread more lies, maybe even take legal action against you to try and isolate Kyle further. Legal action. My head spun at the thought. Ryan had already tried to destroy my marriage. What more could he want? Was he really so obsessed with driving a wedge between Kyle and me that he'd resort to something as drastic as a legal battle? I relayed Maya's findings to Kyle, who listened in silence, his face growing paler with every word. What does he want from us? Kyle muttered, running his hands through his hair. I've already confronted him. He admitted everything. What more is there? That's just it, I said quietly. I think Ryan was playing the long game. Admitting the lies might have been part of his plan to get you to lower your guard. Now he's trying to find another way to pull us apart. Kyle looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperation I hadn't seen before. What do we do, Hannah? How do we fight someone who's willing to go this far? I took a deep breath, knowing this was our chance to stand strong together. We have to be smarter than him, I said. We need to protect ourselves, legally and emotionally. If Ryan is planning something, we have to be ready. The next few days were a blur of meetings with lawyers and consultations with Maya to see if we could uncover any more evidence. I felt like we were racing against the clock, trying to anticipate Ryan's next move before he had the chance to strike. Then, one evening, just as we were starting to feel a glimmer of hope, Ryan showed up at our doorstep. The audacity of him standing there with that smug grin on his face made my blood boil. But I forced myself to stay calm. What do you want, Ryan? Kyle asked, his voice tense. Ryan shrugged nonchalantly, his eyes gleaming with that same cruel satisfaction. I just thought I'd drop by to check in. See how you two are holding up after all the misunderstandings. He said the last word with a smirk that made my skin crawl. You've done enough damage, Ryan, I said, stepping forward. Whatever you're planning, just know that we're ready for it. We've seen through your lies, and we're not going to let you manipulate us anymore. His smirk widened, and he tilted his head, looking at me with mock pity. Oh, Hannah, you still think you've won? That's adorable. But you don't get it, do you? This isn't over until I say it's over. Kyle's fists clenched at his sides, but I placed a hand on his arm to hold him back. What do you want, Ryan? I demanded. Why can't you just leave us alone? Ryan leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper so only we could hear. I want what I've always wanted. For Kyle to see you for what you really are. A liar, a manipulator, someone who's not worthy of him, and if you think you've seen the worst I can do, you're in for a surprise. With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving us standing there in stunned silence. Kyle looked at me, his face pale. What do we do now, Hannah? He's not going to stop. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. We keep fighting, Kyle. We protect ourselves, our marriage. But this time, we don't wait for him to strike. We take the fight to him. That night, I made a decision. If Ryan was determined to destroy our lives, then it was time to expose him for who he truly was. No more playing defense. We would find the dirt he was hiding, the secrets he was using to control and manipulate, and bring it all into the light. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Ryan was cunning, ruthless, and had no limits to how far he'd go. But he had underestimated one thing. Kyle and I were finally on the same side, united in a way we hadn't been before. And this time, we weren't going to let him tear us apart. The days that followed were a whirlwind of strategy and determination. With Ryan's threat hanging over us like a dark cloud, Kyle and I knew we had to act fast. If Ryan was planning something more insidious, we couldn't afford to wait around and hope he'd lose interest. I was done being his target. Now it was time to turn the tables. Maya was more than willing to dive deeper into Ryan's digital trail. She'd already proven her skills in uncovering the doctored photos and fake messages he'd used to try to frame me, but this time we needed something bigger, something that could expose Ryan completely and strip him of the power he held over Kyle. If we could find hard evidence of his manipulations, we could cut him out of our lives once and for all. One night, while I was reviewing the files Maya had sent me, Kyle came into the living room, looking tense. "I was thinking," he said, sitting down next to me, "maybe it's time we involve a private investigator. If Ryan's been hiding something, someone with more resources might be able to find it." It was a solid plan. We needed all the help we could get, and an investigator would have access to resources that Maya and I didn't. So the next day, we met with Greg, 45M, a seasoned private investigator who came highly recommended. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy with years of experience in uncovering hidden secrets and tracking down elusive information. After explaining the situation, Greg nodded thoughtfully. "From what you're telling me, Ryan's behavior sounds like it's driven by more than just jealousy. People who go to these lengths often have something they're hiding themselves. Let me dig into his background, his financials, and any connections he might have. If there's dirt to find, I'll find it." The next week felt like an eternity. I was constantly on edge, half expecting Ryan to show up unannounced again or to pull another trick to destabilize us. But in the meantime, I focused on rebuilding trust with Kyle. It was a slow process, filled with tentative conversations and careful steps toward normalcy. For the first time in months, it felt like we were truly on the same side, facing a common enemy instead of each other. One evening, Kyle and I were sitting together on the couch, something we hadn't done in what felt like forever. We were watching one of our favorite movies, trying to find some semblance of normalcy, when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his brow furrowing. "It's Ryan," he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. "He's sending me more texts, trying to guilt-trip me. Now, he's saying he's the victim and that I betrayed him." I took the phone from him and read the messages. Ryan was doubling down, claiming that Kyle was turning his back on family for a woman who had supposedly manipulated him. It was classic gaslighting, trying to pull Kyle back under his influence by playing the victim. I could see the doubt flickering in Kyle's eyes again, that old fear resurfacing. I knew Ryan was his brother, and no matter what he'd done, there was still that deep-seated loyalty Kyle felt. But I couldn't let Ryan's mind games undo all the progress we'd made. "Kyle," I said softly, taking his hand, "you've seen the truth. We've uncovered his lies together. This is just another attempt to control you, to make you doubt yourself. Don't let him drag you back into that cycle." Kyle nodded slowly, squeezing my hand. "I know. It's just, he's my brother. Part of me keeps hoping that there's a way to fix things, that he'll see reason. I wish I could promise him that Ryan would change, that there was a chance for reconciliation. But deep down, I knew that Ryan was too far gone. His need for control had consumed him, and until he was exposed, he would never stop trying to tear us apart." 2 days later, Greg called us with a breakthrough. He sounded excited, almost triumphant. "I found something you're going to want to see," he said. "Meet me at my office." When we arrived, Greg laid out a series of documents, emails, and phone records he had uncovered. It was a treasure trove of information, each piece more damning than the last. "Ryan's been playing a long game," Greg explained, pointing to a timeline he'd pieced together. "It looks like he's been funneling money into secret accounts, setting up fake identities, and even hiring people to dig up dirt on you, Hannah. But that's not the worst of it. I found evidence that he's been blackmailing other people too. Former colleagues, even some of Kyle's old business associates." My mind was spinning as I tried to process what I was seeing. "So this isn't just about me," I murmured. "He's been sabotaging other people's lives too." "Exactly," Greg confirmed. "And here's the kicker. He's in serious debt. He's been using these schemes to cover up his financial troubles. When he couldn't find dirt on you, Hannah, he decided to manufacture it to force Kyle to choose sides, hoping that if he controlled Kyle, he'd gain access to your finances." Kyle's face was pale as he listened, his hands clenched into fists. "I can't believe this," he whispered. All this time, I thought he was looking out for me, but he was just trying to use me. As we drove home, the wave of the revelations hung heavy in the air. I could see the pain in Kyle's eyes, the realization that his own brother had been manipulating him for years. He had believed in Ryan, trusted him, and now that trust was shattered. What do we do now? Kyle asked quietly as we pulled into our driveway. How do we stop him? I took a deep breath, feeling a surge of determination. We go public with everything Greg found. If Ryan wants to play dirty, we'll expose him. We're not just going to sit back and let him destroy us. Over the next few days, we prepared meticulously. Maya helped compile all the evidence Greg had gathered into a comprehensive report. We drafted a statement detailing the lengths Ryan had gone to in order to manipulate and control us. We planned to send it to key people in our community, people Ryan had tried to poison against me. This would be our way of taking back control. But just as we were finalizing our plan, Ryan made a move we hadn't anticipated. He filed a restraining order against me, claiming I'd been harassing him and making threats. It was an underhanded tactic designed to discredit us before we could release our evidence. Kyle and I were blindsided. The legal notice arrived at our doorstep, and suddenly I was faced with the possibility of being dragged into court on false charges. Ryan was playing his final card, trying to destroy my credibility before I could expose him. But this time, we were ready. We had everything we needed to prove that Ryan's claims were false. We turned to Greg and Maya to help build our counter case, preparing to fight back with everything we had. The night before our court date, as Kyle and I sat surrounded by legal documents and notes, he reached over and took my hand. "I'm sorry, Hannah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have believed you from the start. I let him get into my head, and I almost lost everything." I squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "You didn't lose me, Kyle. We're here together, and now we're going to put an end to this." The next morning, as we walked into the courthouse, I felt a surge of confidence. Ryan had tried to destroy our lives, but we were still standing. And now it was time to expose him for the liar and manipulator he truly was. This was our final stand, and I was ready to fight for my marriage, my reputation, and my future. The courthouse was packed that morning, the air thick with tension. Kyle and I walked in hand, a united front against Ryan's lies and manipulations. As we entered, I caught sight of Ryan sitting at the other side of the room, his usual smug grin plastered on his face. He looked completely unbothered, as if he were confident that he'd already won. But this time, I was ready. We were ready. Greg and Maya had worked tirelessly over the past week to pull together everything we needed. We had stacks of documents, printed copies of emails, financial records, and statements from people Ryan had manipulated. Our lawyer, Sarah, 40F, was confident. "We have enough evidence to not only get this restraining order dismissed, but also to expose him for the fraud he really is," she told us. The proceedings began, and Ryan's attorney launched into a dramatic speech of how Ryan had felt threatened by me and how I had supposedly harassed him after his falling out with Kyle. I could barely contain my anger as they twisted reality to paint me as some unhinged wife trying to ruin her brother-in-law's life. But when it was our turn to present our side, Sarah was methodical. She laid out the evidence we had collected, piece by piece. Greg's investigation had uncovered Ryan's financial desperation, his fraudulent schemes, and his attempts to blackmail other people. The courtroom was silent as Sarah revealed the extent of Ryan's deceit, using hard evidence that Ryan couldn't refute. Ryan's smug grin began to fade as Sarah called Maya to the stand. Maya was calm, collected, and clear as she explained how she discovered the doctored messages and fabricated photos Ryan had used to frame me. She demonstrated to the court how the metadata proved they had been edited just days before Ryan showed them to Kyle. The judge leaned forward, clearly intrigued, as Maya walked everyone through the digital evidence. Then, it was Kyle's turn. He took the stand and spoke from the heart, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I trusted my brother," he said, his eyes glistening. "I let him come between me and my wife because I thought he was protecting me. But the truth is, he was using me. Hannah is the most honest, loyal person I know, and I let Ryan's lies cloud my judgment. I was wrong, and I'm here today to set that right." Hearing Kyle defend me so passionately sent a wave of relief through me. This was the man I had married, the man I had fought so hard to keep. And now, he was fighting for us too. When Ryan took the stand, his confidence had clearly been shaken. He stammered, tried to backtrack on his accusations, and struggled to answer the questions our lawyer threw at him. Sarah presented the damning financial records Greg had found, bank statements showing Ryan's secret accounts, records of shady transactions, and emails where he had pressured people into giving him money. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as more of Ryan's deceit was laid bare. Finally, after hours of testimony and evidence, it was clear to everyone in the room that Ryan's restraining order was nothing more than a desperate attempt to silence me before I could expose him. The judge dismissed Ryan's petition and, in a surprising turn, referred his case to the district attorney for possible charges of fraud and blackmail. Ryan's face turned ashen, his confidence shattered. As the courtroom erupted in whispers, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. We had done it. We had exposed Ryan for who he truly was. After the hearing, as we walked out of the courthouse, reporters who had caught wind of the case swarmed us, shouting questions. But all I could focus on was Kyle beside me, his hand gripping mine tightly. For the first time in months, I felt like we were truly free from Ryan's toxic influence. That evening, we gathered at Maya's apartment with Greg, Sarah, and a few close friends to celebrate. The relief was palpable. It was like we'd been holding our breath for months, and now we could finally exhale. Glasses clinked, and laughter filled the room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could relax without that gnawing fear that Ryan was plotting something in the shadows. As the night wound down, Kyle pulled me aside onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against our faces. He looked at me with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "Hannah," he began, his voice soft but unwavering, "I don't know how to begin to apologize for everything I put you through. I let Ryan's lies poison our marriage. I was so blinded by my loyalty to him that I almost lost the best thing that ever happened to me." I reached up, touching his cheek. "We both made mistakes, Kyle," I said gently. "But what matters is that we fought for each other in the end. You came through when it counted." He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I promise I will never doubt you again," he whispered. "I've seen what we can survive together, and I'm not going to let anyone or anything come between us again." Tears welled up in my eyes as I held him close. For so long, I had feared that Ryan's lies had destroyed us beyond repair. But here we were, stronger than ever, standing together on the other side of the storm. In the weeks that followed, life began to return to something resembling normal. The story of Ryan's deceit had spread through our community, and the people who had once sided with him were now distancing themselves, their judgment replaced with apologies. Ryan, facing legal scrutiny, disappeared from our lives, his desperate attempts to control Kyle and me finally exposed. Kyle and I focused on rebuilding the trust we had lost. We attended couples counseling, not just to heal the wounds Ryan had caused, but to ensure that we never let anyone come between us again. And slowly, tentatively, the love and trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage began to flourish once more. One weekend, we took a much-needed trip to the mountains. Just the two of us. As we hiked up a trail overlooking a stunning view, Kyle turned to me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I've been thinking," he said, taking my hands in his. "Everything we went through, it made me realize how much I want to build a future with you. A future that no one can touch." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart skipped a beat as he opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "I know we're already married, but I want to renew our vows," Kyle said, his eyes shining with emotion. "I want to start fresh, on a foundation of honesty and trust. Will you marry me again, Hannah?" Tears streamed down my face as I nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes, Kyle. 1,000 times yes." In that moment, with the sun setting behind us and the world spread out below, I knew that we had not only survived the storm but had come out stronger on the other side. We had faced betrayal, lies, and heartbreak, but we had chosen each other in the end. And that was a victory Ryan could never take away. This was our new beginning, one built not on the illusion of perfection but on the hard-won truth of who we were and how far we were willing to go to protect what truly mattered. Together, we had weathered the darkest of storms. And together, we would embrace whatever the future held.